Good morning. You are watching or listening to the Citizen Bodycast, which is our podcast for the citizen body. With me today is our co-founder, John Katrina, and we have a special guest that I am excited to get to talk to today. We have Dan Drago from 25'O'clock podcast. Dan, you've been doing this for how many years? About 3, 4?
No. Podcast has been around since 2014, so I'm going into my 7th year right now.
Okay, so you're in on the ground level, ground zero. You're groundbreaking here.
I am the ground level.
That's awesome. What got you into it? What got you started?
I was a touring musician, played in bands for years, spent a lot of my time in a van, spent a lot of my time being demoralized by the general music industry and the slog that it is to be an independent band, to be a DIY type band. But it was, I don't want to make it sound like it was like all doom and gloom. It was a great time. But somewhere around my early 30s, I wanted a little more stability in just my regular life. I was married. We wanted to buy a house. We wanted, just to kind of have a life where it wasn't like I was on a pirate ship for half the year.
Yeah.
So, I got out of the band, but I still had this tie to like the Philadelphia music community and all that. And I had all these friends and I had great contacts and I had a great time. And I didn't want to just be like one of those guys who disappeared from the scene forever. You never saw them again. So I was like making records for people and kind of helping run shows and stuff like that, kind of figuring out what to do. And I listened to podcasts for years because, you sit in the van and you sit in the back and you're not driving and you want to just sort of escape, let the miles run by. And I thought, well, I can do this. I have stuff around my house. I've got a mic and, I've been making records with people. So like I have some gear. And then I just started doing it at my kitchen table in my old apartment. And that was, like I said, that was 2014 and started slow, started just me kind of talking to my friends and friends of friends. And the next thing you know, you've been doing it for almost 7 years, almost 200 episodes, and no one is more surprised by that than I am.
Yeah. And it's funny because the Citizen Bodycast, a lot of what we talk about is, us being able to relate to each other as humans. We talk about the things that unite us versus the things that divide us is basically where we come from. And one of the things that unites the three of us is the Philly music scene. It was a big part of my past as well, but not from a musician standpoint. I was your bartender. I was your cocktail waitress. And, and it was neat because I was thinking about it when we were talking about, the concept of the three of us getting together and kind of hashing this out a little bit. And I noticed that, we really depended on each other to make a good evening happen, where, the people who come out to see your band, I'd be counting on them for, the service oriented piece of it and, business and tips. But if I don't treat them well, they don't want to come out and see you play. Oh, and it was really, a work together type of a cohesive thing. So, I know it from a little bit different perspective, but you guys really know it more from the music. And I think it's really neat. The Philadelphia area, which is where we're all located right now, really does have a very thriving music scene, and has a pretty rich history with that. And I think with your podcast, Dan, you delve into that quite a bit.
I try to, yeah. I try to not just talk to artists and musicians, although there are plenty of those, and that's always a good talk. I like talking process. I like talking songwriting, and I like, doing a little bit of the gossipy aspect of it too, where we talk about not talk about other bands in a gossipy way, but like be like, oh, have you checked out this band? And like, oh, I just played with this person, back when we could play with others. And that's a great aspect of it. But I love talking to anyone sort of involved in the music community. And I've been trying to change my vocabulary over the last couple of years and not use the word scene as much as I use the word community. A scene can be a little more self-centered. Like it's about like, well, how do I appear? Like, how am I being regarded? Where a community is bigger than you. So you kind of as we were talking about it in our pre-roll, like the Zen idea of sort of removing ego from things. And of course, that's impossible to fully do it, but if you can start to make those steps in that direction, which is sort of a roundabout way to talking about, like, I don't want to just talk to the people who are out front. I don't want to just talk to, you know, the star of the show. I want to talk to promoters and bookers and talent buyers and producers and engineers and venue managers and, like, even, yeah, wow, bar staff. I never really considered bar staff before, but that would be, no, that's a key element to one of the ways that we can take in live music and entertainment. It's all about hospitality, really, when you get down to it. And a good club, a good venue, a good space needs to be a hospitable space, not just for the patrons, not just for the guests. It needs to be hospitable for the bands, from the headliners on down to the opener. It needs to be hospitable to its own employees and its own vendors and people who contract with them. And if you can do that, make a whole circle of hospitality where everyone feels taken care of.
Yeah.
Sound guy and the dishwasher, all the way up to the headlining band. Then, like, you've created, you've got it. You won. I think a place like Johnny Brenda's does that very, very well.
I was just going to ask you what's your favorite place, or if you've got some places that you say that you go like, wow, I really look forward to, you know, when you were in a band, like, I love to play there. Where was your go-to rooms?
For playing or for enjoying?
Yes and yes, both.
For playing, I always love playing at World Cafe.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite places to see a show.
That place is constructed from the ground up. Literally, every decision made in that venue is for people. Is to make a great experience, which is like how restaurants think of things and how, you know, retail shops think of things. That's how any business wants to think of things. You want to create a good experience. For everything down from, like, where the seats are located and the walls they're put in terms of sound, to the flow of the whole building. I always play upstairs to downstairs, actually, despite the fact, you know, downstairs is like the more headliney area. But the few times I played downstairs, like with my band, on that stage is so big and we were so far away from each other, I was like, this is weird. Like, I'm so like bumping into my guitar player or something like that. And, like, that's just kind of how you do it as a, you know, as an indie band. You don't have a ton of space. I liked playing upstairs too. Everyone was closer. And you were a little more down on ground level. It was you know, if you're to get metaphorical on it, it's just a little more egalitarian.
Yeah. Yeah, I always noticed, like, I would go to see a show, and the shows that I would see would be the downstairs show, and it's always the same band that I go to see nowadays. But, you know, it was just such a great place to see. And sometimes I would say, let's go down early and get a bite to eat, because they have a great bar and they had decent food. And, you know, then all of a sudden you'd be sitting there and there'd be somebody playing on, oh, there's an upstairs stage, and you'd get to hear some music prior to going down. And for me, it was a chance to check out something new. And it just reminded me of, like, the clubs back when I was working. You know, it was nowhere near as sophisticated as it is now. And, you know, like, we'd be putting up flyers, like, you know, in the bathroom. And I noticed when I go to the bathroom, the flyers are still on the wall, but they're nicer, they're better produced, they're framed, you know, there's really a lot more advertisement and promotion of the, you know, the upcoming acts that are coming, you know, local or national, coming into a venue like that, because they really do house just about everybody.
Yeah. That's a place I always like to play. I'm trying to think of other places I like to play. There was a period where Legendary Dobbs had sort of reopened and rebranded itself from being the Pontiac before. And I loved the Pontiac as well. I loved playing upstairs at the Pontiac, like in the early 2000s. It was this just long, dark, kind of grimy red room.
Was that near Dobbs, like a couple blocks away?
It was Dobbs.
Okay.
JC Dobbs, you know, in its heyday in the 80s and 90s, closed down, reopened as the Pontiac right around the time, I think a little before when I moved here in like 03, 04.
Okay.
and then it was a Pontiac. It was the Pontiac Grill for a while, and it was cool. It had the upstairs music room and the downstairs bar and restaurant, and then it closed down again, I think, and rebranded itself as the legendary Dobbs. Is sort of like, going harkening back to that era of South Street and all that. And there was a period there of a couple of years where I played a ton of shows at Legendary Dobbs, and it was a really cool atmosphere. There was just like, think of it sometimes like a high school graduating class or something like that. There was like a particular class of us in that time that
Yeah.
walked between there and like lickety split across the street and stuff like that. And it was fun. It was like this little community, and a community within a community, like a smaller subset, a tribe, so to speak. And that was a lot of fun. And like, none of us got paid enough to break the bank. It wasn't like we were quitting our jobs or anything. But if you're not going to get paid in money, and y'all should get paid in money, but if you can't get paid in money,
Drink,
it should be a
drink
good,
tickets.
yeah, well, it should be a good hang. It should be a good
Yeah.
time.
And I just want to point out, Sue, to all the listeners that, we are talking about the Philly music scene, over the years. I'm sure every city can relate, that at some point, like it sounds like you can almost insert this into any city in America. That's what happens. But Philly does have, every city's unique in some way, but a history of great musicians kind of coming out of it, but not staying. So one of the things that we wanted to kind of get into a little bit today is this art small idea, where people, how do you make your own music community in your own city? How do you support the musicians that are your neighbors? And, if you look hard enough, will you find some talent right next door to you that you might not even realize was there? I think Dan's podcast can help people do that. Because,
and I think also, especially, now, we're a little over a year into the COVID pandemic, and it's really taken us away, like we've just been talking about all the venues here on the Citizen Bodycast of, where do we go to find our music, and, being able to bond through that. And now, restaurants and clubs, they're talking about reopening at, partial capacity, and how do we still foster that community? And, we've got the podcast. Where else do you see this going, Dan?
Oh, in terms of like how to
How do we reconnect? How do we get back?
I think a lot of it is just going to be getting to a point from a health and safety standpoint where we can gather people together again. Like, and I think once we do that, I mean, once people can gather together, I think the learning curve of us sort of getting back into enjoying, a music community, enjoying that, is not going to take very long. It's not like, it's not like we willfully forgot about it. You know what I mean?
We can't wait, actually.
Yeah, but I think it is. I mean, I think it is important right now to wait a little longer. As I've been talking to people lately. I mean, I've been talking to people about this for a year, but I've been talking to more people lately. The consensus, at least among the like-minded people who think like I do, or who I vibe with, is we've waited this long. Let's wait a little longer.
Yeah. Why throw it all away for one event?
But on the other hand, I'm sympathetic with places that want to jump out kind of guns blazing right now. I don't necessarily agree with it, and I wouldn't endorse it, but I understand it. Like, these places have spent the last year just taking it in the teeth, just absolutely just getting wailed on, and no one was coming to help them. No one, except each other. Like, musicians helping musicians, community members helping community. There was no help from on high. There was no Deus Ex Machina, showing up to save us. And I understand why some of these places, they're just like, I'm bleeding. I can't bleed any longer. Like, I have to do something. And that's why you see, restaurants building these absurd wooden huts out on the street, and putting heat lamps in. And I look at them and I'm like, part of my brain is like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. The other part of my brain is like,
it's brilliant.
What else are you going to do? What else you do? Just like being in a DIY band, like when you get creative in marketing, or anyone who creates anything, who has to get creative in how I get my message out, how I sustain myself. I look at that, I'm like, but what else are you gonna do? Like, no one's gonna help you. It's not like some of these, we hear stories of these more, socialist style European governments that are just like, no, we gave everyone off and we paid them. Like that's a great story for us here in America, but it seems more like a fairy tale than anything else. So as I watch these places, some of them jump the gun, some of them get I think a little too overzealous in this period right now. I have to sort of check myself and not be super judgmental and just be like, but what would I do if
Yeah.
if I operated a small, 150 cap room bar restaurant? What would I do? And I'd be like, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But probably try a whole bunch of wild stuff just to literally stay alive.
Yeah.
I
I
know.
noticed.
I'm
I
sorry.
noticed one of our one of our local venues in Ardmore, so which is a suburban town just outside Philadelphia, the Ardmore Music Hall. I know another. It's like another one in the top five for me to go and see a show, and they just did like a full inside remodel. I saw it on Facebook, and they kind of like walked you through, and they kept the basic structure of everything the same, but they put a ton into like revamping the indoor space and just putting it up to a little more up to date than it was. It was already not bad, and they really made it very nice. And I kind of wonder, like they're welcoming, like they can't wait until they can get people back in, on the bar stools, people back up on the stage,
Yeah.
and get everything running again. And everybody takes a different approach. And when you say, like, what would I do? I'm like, I don't know if I would have sunk a lot of money into doing something like that, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wow, they really made a commitment, and I can't wait to go.
Me too. That was one of the last places I played in before
Yeah.
before this all went down. I played a great Robert Hunter tribute night. Robert Hunter being the lyricist and songwriter for the Grateful Dead. He was Jerry's guy.
Yeah.
And that was a great time. Talk about an amazing night of tons of artists of a community. Talk about a night of an example of a community. All of us getting together and sharing the common thread of, hey, we all love the music of the Grateful Dead. We all love the music and lyrics written by Robert Hunter, like who had died, I think within that past year. I opened the show. I was terrified, like to go up by myself with my guitar first, but I volunteered for that for some reason. And I got up, I'll tell you a funny story too. So about 2 minutes before I'm set to go on, and I'm thinking like, well, if I'm in the opening spot, there won't be that many people here yet. This will be okay. Like I'll go up, I'll do my thing, and I'll get out. And I looked up over the edge of the stage while I was in the back, and there was like 120 people, like 150 people, just all out there. And I was like, well, so much for that plan. Like 2 minutes, 90 seconds to going on. And the guitar player for the house band, who I was not using, I was just by myself, a guy named Mike Corrado, comes up to me and he goes, hey, do you think you want to kind of go up there before you start and like kind of do some remarks, kind of open up the night? And I just looked at him, my eyes got so wide, and he just read that. He goes, or I could do it. And I was just like, yeah, how about you do that? I was like, I am not doing that.
Were you playing Dead covers? Is that what you were doing?
I played two Robert Hunter written Dead tunes.
Yeah.
Two kind of deep cuts too in the beginning of the night, because like you got to get people warmed up before you play like Owens or China Cat Sunflower. So I got up and I did Mountains on the Moon, which is probably one of my favorite Dead tunes. That's a slightly earlier tune for them, a little more pastoral, a little more in like the folk psychedelic world as opposed to like the rock psychedelic world. And then I did If I Had the World to Give, which is like one of my favorite what I call the Jerry ballads.
So you're glad you pushed yourself and did it, right?
Oh yeah, but I was driving over there thinking to myself, this guy, one of the talent buyers there, a guy named Jesse Lundy, reached out to me and like sort of asked me, but sort of also told me that he was putting me in it. And I was driving to Ardmore from Philadelphia, and I was sitting in the car and just kind of, thinking as I was going over, and it occurred to me, why the hell would he do this to me? Like, why? Who lets me do this? Like, why?
Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time, you know?
Networking too, you know,
Yeah.
people up to. But I was driving. I had this moment, like I was like kind of mad at Jesse for a moment. I'm like, why would he let me do this?
Now you're happy with them, right?
Oh no, of course I was. It was just funny. I was just like who am I? Like and that sort of like like that artist doubting thing where you're just like, who am I to get up in front of what's going to be, you know, over 200 Grateful Dead fans, and if we know Grateful Dead fans, they're hardcore. Like I'm like, who am I to get up in front of these people? Some of them probably saw the actual band live many times. To like get up and play my sad Jerry tunes for
Any musician, I think, listening to this can relate to the sort of bipolar tendency to feel like I'm going to do this. I'm going to go up on the stage and having second thoughts like, what am I thinking? I don't know. I go through that still, you know, at this age, like almost every single time. Like, am I a fraud? Like, yeah. But some, I think probably, you know, a percentage of people that are up on that stage are going through that. And it's part of their struggle is to get out there and do it. I wanted to throw an idea out though, kind of to both you guys, since you've been involved in the music scene is, so if we can't rush out to the venues just yet, and we want to be cautious, isn't this an opportune time to try to find some local talent around us that maybe we plan to go and see, or we start listening to, following, sharing amongst our community? Because the whole citizen body idea is that, you know, the body functions together in cooperation, you know, and it does it on its own volition because all of the cells just inherently know how to cooperate and get their resources in proportion that's healthy for the whole. So music wise, we're thinking the art small piece of what we do is encouraging people to find local art and artists and musicians that they can start supporting and listening to, as opposed to 100% of their art diet being just whatever Spotify's playing, whatever Apple Music is playing. And I think, Dan, with your podcast and what in conjunction what we're trying to do is to get people just to even be aware that there's an entire community here in Philly that might have some great acts, you know?
Not even might, absolutely does. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we as a city have enjoyed some more national attention, I'd say, over the last decade or so, of bands that come out of Philly but also stay. Like, there's bands that originate in Philly and then don't immediately go to, you know, one of the more music industry cities. I'm talking New York City or Los Angeles or Nashville. Now, these are bands that like continue to make their home here in Philadelphia, and certain members may move here and there, and people kind of move about. But like the core is still Philly. I think of a band like Hop Along, who came up very organically out of the Philadelphia singer-songwriter and basement show scene. Made a record themselves. It got some, you know, it got some traction. So they made another record that did better, and then they made a third record that did better, and that's, you know, that's sort of the trajectory. But all of them still call Philadelphia home. They own studios. They worked in venues. They, you know, this is their community, and that's just one example of that. That's like a sort of a higher recognized example right there. But that's they're not a fluke.
Are they still active, Dan? Hop Along?
About as active as anybody is right now.
Okay.
Their front person, Francis, put out a solo album right at the beginning of 2020, and I know they had plans of a tour and all that, and of course that got dashed to the floor. Their guitar player, Joe Reinhardt, owns the Headroom, which is a studio here in Philadelphia. Him and another musician named Kyle Pulley, and they've been just trying to put bands out and try and do remote work and all that. And they're just one example of what a lot of other people in their same situation are doing.
Yeah.
The community part of the music world, just, you know, we spent maybe the first month or so, you know, with our heads ringing, like we just got absolutely sucker punched. But the really the creative people, the successful people, and I don't mean that simply in a monetary way, but like successful people figure it out. They pivot, they change, they alter, they adapt, and I think all the people who are going to be the most successful in the long run are the people who have spent this last year being creative, being smart, figuring out new stuff, making new connections amongst the community, trying things that like they might not have ever tried before. And those are the people who are going to be successful in the long run.
And just to remind everybody that you are listening or watching the Citizen Bodycast, and this is our podcast, and we are talking to Dan Drago about local music and community, and how do we art small, and how do we get going again, and how do we keep it going when it's time to get back out there. I noticed, Dan, I saw a few people do something early on when COVID had first started. They started doing like a Facebook Live, and it was like, some people asked for monetary donations for like their own little concert, and they'd say, hey, Sunday afternoon, join me from 3 to 5 o'clock, and I'll be playing, this, or you can tap in and request. Did you see any folks doing that with any level of success?
I saw a lot of people attempt it, and at the beginning it seemed like it was like super fun and really novel at the time. Like,
yeah.
I think some people got a little burned out from it. I think the creators as well as the people watching it got a little burned out from it, because it's a lot. There's a lot of production aspect to that. Even I speak to myself, where I even attempted to do a thing where it's like, I'm going to do like live stream radio. Like it's going to look like this, like me here with the mic and the junk behind me. And I'm going to play songs from, Philly community people. And I'm going to have like little title cards that show up. I kind of figured out a piece of software to do that. I did it twice. It was semi-disastrous, just from a technical aspect. Like, I played the music and people tuned in, and that was the most important part. I wanted people to hear the music and just sort of enjoy themselves. But from a technical aspect, and being a bit of a, perfectionist control freak like I am, I viewed the whole thing as an absolute disaster.
But then what might somebody like me maybe tuning in, would I have, you know what I mean? You're your own worst critic.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you have noticed
yeah. Or
yes.
Would I have said, hey, wow, look at all that effort he put into it. It turned out great. Or, like, well, at least he tried.
You would have noticed the snafus, but you would have been forgiving. I would hope. Most people were very forgiving about it. But of course, for me, it was at times a point of embarrassment, where I was just like, no, I should get this right the first time. Like, I'm some sort of super genius. And like, that's not how things work. We all know that.
So actually, I was thinking about, I'm glad you mentioned this. The band is Hop Along, I think you said, Dan?
Yeah.
Okay. Citizen Body had a kickoff event online, and we had a Philly musician here play in the beginning and end as part of the event, and just simple at the piano by herself on a Zoom call, no production. We did a little bit of a sound check. Her name is Kalani Baylor, and she's one of my favorite new Philly musicians. She has a SoundCloud under KB Sunshine. But she also has a YouTube channel, Kalani, Kolina. Is that right? Kalani? No, Kolani. Sorry, can't spell in my head. But Kalani Baylor is somebody I would recommend you check out. She performed, and we paid her. So we're trying to do the art small thing. So the people donated, and she got paid. It wasn't a ton of money, but probably as much as you might make at a show in a bar.
Yeah.
So we're trying to hold events like that, and if people go check out Hop Along, I don't know, Sue, if you know anybody you found in the local scene that you want to mention, but by doing this, I think people can start to just be aware to put in their diet of art some small independent acts.
Yeah.
And that's why we have a featured artist every week too, that they can see at thecitizenbody.com. Hopefully Dan starts recommending some more people to us. I think if the community starts focusing together, then we can actually start to see a stronger community, because it has that money component where people can actually start to make a little bit of money. So even though it's a tiny bit of money for Kalani and a tiny event, if we start doing harnessing the power of what we call en masse, and everyone starts thinking that way a little bit more, I think we can start to move mountains.
Yeah. I mean, I could suggest artists for forever. Like not just people who have been on my show, although at this point, I'm moving towards almost 200 episodes, so I've talked to a whole lot of people. But it's sort of a web that comes out from that. And I was talking about, like, when I first started out, just sort of talking to my friends and people that I knew immediately, and then they would recommend people, and then I would talk to those people, and then sooner or later I looked up and realized, like, oh, like the last 5 shows have been people I've never met before until they came over to the house, and we started talking. And then as things progressed, I realized, like, oh, people are reaching out to me now as much as I'm reaching out to guests, and that's always a good place to be.
Yeah.
You kind of wake up and realize that, oh, I guess I'm, like, not the guy, but I'm one of the guys that, like, one of the people that people can reach out to, based solely on reputation of the show, and not just because somebody knows me or somebody knows someone who knows me. Although the city ain't that big, and it's, we're all about 2 to 3 degrees away from each other anyway. But that's always a good feeling to realize, like, oh, like I'm respected, and not, I don't mean like just personally respected, but I mean, like, oh, the thing that I put out into the world is getting in front of a lot of different people, and they look at it and say, this is valid, this is worthy of my time, not just to listen to, but worthy of my time to reach out to. Maybe they can help me. And I love nothing more than, being an outlet. It's nice to have something to offer. When you're in a band, you're always asking for things like, play my record, play my song, buy my stuff, go to my show, me, need. And that's, that's the nature of the beast right there. But now it's great that, like, I have something to offer. If I go to someone who I'm just like, I want this person on my show, I have something to offer. And they have something to offer me too. They offer me content, they offer me a great conversation, and for me to continue to perpetuate what I do. But, like, it's more give and take right there than just, like, going to, like, a club or a radio station or whatever and being like, do something for me. And they're like, okay, what can you do for us? Probably nothing.
It seems like it's a great way to network as well, because I remember, back then it was people, you knocked on doors and you tried to give out your tapes and listen. And like you said, need, me. And when you have that give and take, we always talk about, how do you build your network, not just for, your business, but also for art, because for some people, their art is their business. They're trying to, they're really trying to make a living. For some folks, it's a hobby. For some folks, this is what they, plan to do with their lives. And, like back when we were coming up and we were all kids, there was no American Idol, there was no The Voice or any of those things. Like, everybody uses those to get famous and they just get on TV. And I was like, I can't watch a lot of those shows because I say, what happened to the legwork that my friends were doing back in the 80s and the 90s? And they were, knocking on doors and playing clubs and for, practically nothing. And then everybody's just on TV doing this. How does that work?
Oh, I assure you, there are still bands playing clubs for next to nothing.
I know. And the thing is, a lot of them, they have just as much talent as the person who was able to get on TV, and I'm not knocking them or taking away from their talent. It's just like, you don't see that. I need to build my network, and and I'm sure it goes on behind the scenes too. But when you work in the club and you see the people who are coming back, week after week, month after month, and plugging away and trying, it's neat. It's interesting to see how building your network has changed over the years.
Sure. Yeah, it's both easier and harder to build a network right now. Easier in the fact that, like, we can mass communicate with each other in ways that we were not able to do. And I mean, you talk about the 80s and I can talk about the 90s, like, but it's, we still had kind of the same apparatuses in front of us. It's easier to communicate to people. The problem is everyone can do that. So it just becomes this din, like this noise where there's just constant things. Just because there are more bands doesn't necessarily mean that like the quality of music has improved or not improved. It just simply means there are more people who have accessed this mass communication, network that exists in the world. That's literally, at least in my opinion, that's literally all it means, is that like I can go on YouTube, you can go on YouTube, we can all go on YouTube. Okay, now what?
That's where I feel lost. And it's like, okay, I've watched that, but then I don't have anybody to share that with unless somebody's I know watched it as well, or there's nobody there next to me to talk to, when I've watched my YouTube video, unless somebody's in the room with me and
Yeah,
watched it.
guys, and that's what we're trying to do, and why I thought this would be a good idea to talk is because, if people start realizing that, the rush of the performance that you get when you see someone live, it's probably a lot closer to you than you think. But in sort of the globalization, we've developed these comfort configurations where we turn on the TV, whatever's on is our information diet. We go to social media, whatever's presented in front of us is information diet. If we take a little bit of our own stock and initiative and say, wait, let me look at my strategy for finding art. Let me look at my strategy for finding businesses. So we call it the think big, act small movement, where art small is a component of it. Because if you start thinking that I'm going to shop small, but I'm also going to vote small, but I'm also going to news small. So we start recommending resources, and that's what we kind of want to do today, is recommend 25 o'clock, which is named after an XTC song. I hope I'm allowed to say that, right?
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's one of the reasons you can't find my podcast on Spotify, is because I refuse to take out my music clips that are like the opening and closing of the show.
Oh, really? Okay. XTC for our younger listeners. So it's a band from the 1980s, was pretty much their peak, I guess you would say, Dan.
Yeah, massive in England. Not as much of a splash here in the States, but for all us nerdy dudes with glasses and beards, like they're for some of us, they're very important band. Just a very
and for the nerdy ones with glasses and no beard, like myself, you might know the song "Senses Working Overtime," which was their probably biggest hit in the States. I actually tried to cover that at one point. Well, because we think
that doesn't sound like I don't think that's an easy one to cover, is it?
It's not for me, but it didn't stop me, like we were talking about in the beginning. But actually, now I might need to hide the video on YouTube. But it's got like four views, and I think 3 of them are mine, and one's my mom. But but what I'm saying
now, it'll be 5, and it'll be mine. I'll be the 5th.
Oh, okay. Well, we were actually thinking about that song as one of the music of the citizen body, because a lot of people feel this sense of overwhelm, information. They don't trust the information. They feel like they have to fact check the fact checked, and then fact check the fact check the fact. So this sense of sort of like overwhelm, and just like polarization and all these things that have people angry. Senses Working Overtime, I thought, spoke to that. And that was back in what, 83 or 4, Dan? You probably know the year of release.
I don't recall. I know which record it's on, but
yeah. English Settlement, right? Is it?
Oranges and Lemons.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Sorry. But anyway, that song, the lyrics to that song, to me, it was, and I'm sure it means different things to different people, but 5 senses working overtime, trying to take this all in and make sense of it, and and taste the difference between lemon and lime, pain and pleasure, church bell softly. Like we're looking at not having our senses being overwhelmed, and coming up with a philosophic system that we can all start to be problem solving mode. And we see the acting small part of it as you're consciously directing your power, as opposed to compulsively directing it, which is like, turn on the tube, whatever's on, I'm going to digest it. Yeah. Go shopping on whatever comes up. Oh, it's Amazon, I'm just going to buy there. Like mindlessly consuming for convenience, as opposed to consciously directing and strategically investing your time and energy, and we call it your admiration, in more local, organic things. And that, we think, is part of an entire whole movement that Art Small is a major component of. So that's, yeah.
I like that. Yeah, because like we can spend money and we can spend time, but yeah, you can your esteem, your admiration, the things that you get excited about. I like the idea that more and more of those things can be happening closer to you, like,
Mhm.
and not just geographically
Yeah,
closer, but
exactly.
closer to you is like closer at your level as
Human contact.
yeah, absolutely. And what we've learned in the last year, a lot of artists, as Suzanne was saying, with live streaming and reaching out over the internet, is that people still want to connect. And since we can't connect in person, then we're going to connect virtually. And the cool thing about connecting virtually is that now you can reach out to people all over the world, conceivably. And while it's not that like physical closeness of people together in a room, there's a virtual closeness. I guess like I like people in the chat, like everyone talking to each other. Who knows? Maybe people meet up in the chat, and then like later maybe they have their own communication on the side. Good friend of mine in the music scene here. His name is Drew Nugent. He's like a hot jazz musician.
Hmm.
Phenomenal player. If you've ever wandered around Rittenhouse Park in the last year in good weather, you've seen him and his trio in a socially distant way, playing music for people.
What's the name of his? Is it just his name and then the trio?
Drew Nugent and the Midnight Society.
Rue Nugent.
Drew, Drew,
Through.
Drew. Okay, sorry that it's breaking up a little bit. Drew Nugent and the Midnight Society.
Yeah. Amazing player, remarkable resource on all things of the hot jazz era. A really solid cat to know. Like I'm glad I know him. Every time he and I have a conversation, I learn something, and he just he knocks my socks off when he plays. Horn player and a piano player and a amazing showman, like an amazing entertainer. But the point I want to make about Drew, besides like yelling his praises to everyone who will listen, is that he was doing a variety show out of a French restaurant room in the city right before COVID hit. I can't remember the name of the restaurant. I apologize. But when that couldn't happen anymore, he's like, well, I guess we'll figure out how to do this online. That opened up the people that he could feature exponentially. He could now feature, vaudeville style and jazz style musicians and artists from around the world. So he was bringing in people from Africa. He was bringing in people from Europe. And he has a really great audience like online, and everyone tunes in and gets to see people from all around the world. So in a way, you've sort of made your community a little smaller right there. You've brought it in closer because now, like, people be like, oh, I had no idea there were these guys in, Africa who do like the vaudeville ladder trick or something like that in front of people. He's like, oh, I didn't know there was, these particular burlesque dancers from this part of Europe or something like that. But now everyone within that community knows. They've made the community bigger, but also kind of brought it in a little closer too. So it's interesting that we were able to do that. And I wouldn't have called that. Like I couldn't have foreseen that, but probably someone smarter than me did foresee that. And that's why we're doing it that way.
I'm going to see, maybe we can put links in the podcast, maybe the YouTube version, Sue, of some of these names we mentioned.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Dan. What did you think? Give me like an unsung hero, somebody that you think I may not have heard of, but gosh, I really ought to know who that is just because they're so good.
Oh, sure. I actually just got off an email correspondence back and forth with someone before I jumped on with you guys. The guy's name is Brian Walker. He plays under the name A Day Without Love. He is, in my opinion, the hardest working man in showbiz. Like,
okay,
just an absolute DIY beast. Like, he does everything himself and he does everything, which is you know, sounds exhausting, and I don't understand how he lives his life with any amount of sanity. But he seems very well adjusted, so it seems to work. But he plays under the name of Day Without Love. Aside from putting out countless self-produced records and collaborations with other musicians, you know, talk about opening up your network. We could all learn a masterclass from this guy. And
What style of music would you say he is?
he's sort of a acoustic singer-songwriter. I guess the kids would call it a little more in the emo vein, which is also interesting because he's an African American male, and that's not a demographic that you see much in like sort of the punk emo DIY world.
Yeah.
And he can definitely speak to that at a much higher level of detail than I can. You guys should have him on. I'll send you his info when we're done here. He's a remarkable, well-spoken fountain of knowledge.
He could be a featured artist too, Dan, maybe.
Absolutely. Any chance I have to shout out Brian Walker, I take it. But aside from being a musician, which would take up most anyone else's life right there, he's a writer. He just released a digital publication of his own poetry. He was making little short films when he would go on tour, back when people could do that. And he just sent me a trailer of a documentary that he's finishing up, all about like house show spaces and safe spaces, you know, places for people, you know, safe spaces for people who aren't white, safe spaces for people who aren't straight, safe spaces for trans people, for like all safe spaces for women, like all these things. And his documentary is about like touring and playing these like house shows, and how when the overall major, you know, when the national world, when the overall like regular culture doesn't provide this for you, doesn't seem to give a toss about you, these are people who go in and create their own art small communities, who create their own areas and say like, well, look, if no one else is going to help us, then we'll help ourselves.
Is he in Philly, Dan?
Yes, he is. He's Philly born and bred. He's more Philly than I am.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, we'd love to connect. Yeah.
Now we're looking at your podcast coming up on its 200th episode, as we had talked about, as you had mentioned earlier, and it's on, if we wanted to find it on the internet, we would go 25o'clockpod.com.
Yep.
And
Also
what do you have?
Podcasts. Yeah, sorry. Anywhere else you get podcasts, it's available on any of the your Stitcher, your Podcast Republic, et cetera, et cetera.
But not Spotify, right, Dan?
It's not Spotify. No.
Yeah. Okay.
I found it on Apple Podcasts.
Cool.
I found it very easily. So it's the number 2, the number 5, and then o'clock.com is where you could find it. Or you just type in 25 o'clock, it's the first thing that pops up.
Yep.
So since the 200th episode is coming up, what do you have planned? Anything special?
I cannot reveal that yet.
Oh,
A surprise.
Partially, I'm not going to reveal it because I do want it to be, you know, I want it to have a little gravity behind it. And also, I cannot reveal it because I am not 100% certain what it is going to
so you really don't know what it is yet?
It's a little column A and a little column B.
But I used to tell my professors, I can't reveal what my term paper is going to be about.
I think you did that in high school too, John.
Yeah.
I think I remember that line.
I forgot that she knows me from high school. That's a problem. We'll edit that out.
Yeah. No, leave it in.
I can't reveal and couldn't reveal it even if I knew. I wouldn't reveal it even if I knew.
Okay.
I'm working. I've got some wheels spinning. I've pulled shows. I've been pulling a show out of the air for 7 years. I can pull another one if I have to.
And speaking of 7 years, what's changed, if anything, about your podcasting from the beginning until now? What changes have you seen?
I mean, I like to think I got better at it. Got more streamlined, at least from the back end. Things that other people wouldn't see, but things that are important to me as someone who produces it and all that. I've gotten more efficient. My network has grown, so I'm able to, have access to more things than I had access to before. And like I was saying before, as the reputation of the show grows and people see it as part of the community, that's super helpful as well, because now it's not just like, I'm not just like some dude doing a weird podcast out of his basement, like that two people listen to. It's like, oh, people listen to this. People, you know, people listen to the artist. Like it's an interesting thing when we talk about ego. Is that like, yes, I want people to listen to my show because I worked hard on it, and you know, I want, you know, I'd like a little validation from that. But more importantly, I want people to look at the artists that I feature, look at the people that I feature, and then go down that rabbit hole. Like, there's not a ton of personal information about me out there in the podcast, although it comes out in my conversation. But I really, really do want to focus on like, okay, well, who's the artist about? Who's this person about? Like, how did they get here? You know, what is their story? Why should you care? You know, that's what I want to do. But you know, there is also, you know, a small amount of validation from me, like, because I did the work, and you know, you want to see. You want to see people listening, and you want to hear people listening. I can't really see people listening, but
so when you say you feel like you've gotten more efficient, in what way would you define efficiency? Is it you know, getting to the point of what it is that you want to draw out of that artist, or is it something, because I know you also have a background in radio production, and you also have done producing for some of the music, so you also have it on the technical aspect of doing the podcast as well. So is it like, let's take the interviewing side of it first. Is it that your interviewing style is more efficient, or how's it evolved?
I think I've gotten better at being an interviewer. I don't know. Other listeners would probably be a better judge of whether or not I'm better at it or not. It's always the thing that I say sometimes, is that like, I am usually the worst person to ask when an interview finished. How did it go? I'd be like, I don't know. Like, we were in it. I wasn't really thinking about it until it's over. I'm the worst person to ask afterwards about how it went, because I'm still digesting it, and
I'll have to remember that, Sue.
I know when John and I, like, after I wrap up a podcast, if I do it myself, or you know, I always think, hey, gee, that went really well. And then I'll talk to John and I'll say, you know, hey, what'd you think? And he'd be like, well, and I'm like, oh man, I need to be a better critic.
I have no idea. Like, I don't know. And also, I'm still buzzing. It's like being in a band when you walk off stage. I don't ask me how it went. I don't know. Like, I'm still high. Like, you know, I'm still kind of.
Yeah, I'm still enjoying the conversation. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, like one of the folks that I interviewed a few weeks ago. She's opening up, her grand opening of her store is coming up, and you know, I was thinking, you know, for an hour or two, you know, after the interview, like, I got to get down there and see her store and meet her in person and see, you know, see her store. This sounds really exciting. And then you just have that little high afterward, and then you're like, you know, it's hard to criticize, you know, be your critic.
Oh, I can always criticize myself. I'm very good.
I think we all can.
Musicians are really good at it, or really bad, I guess. If they're a lead singer, they're bad, right? But I will say that what we're thinking about doing too is we provide like a news resource to News Small, and you know, we want to provide resources to Art Small, but you know, that's tough when you have a nation and everyone just needs to know, like, look locally. But maybe we can create like a section where we suggest things like 25 o'clock as a resource to Arting Small. You know, like we suggest news 1440, the newsletter, as a resource to News Small. And then the other one is I guess it's the Shop Small. There are some movements of Shop Small, but you know what's funny about that? They're usually American Express, and one of them's like Bank of America. Like they're like under the guise of like supporting small business, and they're giant corporations. Like Goldman Sachs had
Yeah, use our large credit card to shop small.
So we're trying to actually do it from actual small businesses and real small, you know. So that's what we're trying to get started, Dan.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's important when you talk about Art Small is that like the small is in like reference to the scope of what's around you. But I think it's important that like we don't consider the things that we can access close to us here as being small in nature. You know what I mean? I often think of this idea that Bob Boilen from NPR's All Songs Considered floated once where he was just like, I don't like the term local music. It sounds quaint. It sounds homespun. It sounds less than.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
Actually, to me, like when we talk like art small and local,
yeah.
to me, the word that pops into my head is accessible.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It is immediately. I mean, lots of things are immediately attainable right now, but like, you can not just when it comes to music, which is something I can speak on. Not only can you obtain the music easily, you've got your larger delivery systems for that. I think Bandcamp is one of the better ones in terms of like larger. I mean, Bandcamp is a multinational corporation, but like in terms of how they let artists get their stuff out,
Yeah.
uh, of all the ways to do it, they're the least harmful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's we have to be realists at times. I can't go start my own internet related distribution thing just for my friends to keep it pure. Like that's exhausting, and you know there are places that can do it better than I can.
But Dan, you're absolutely right about. I'm really glad you made that point about anything small sounds diminutive, but it's not. It's actually very often the opposite.
Yeah.
It actually means that the human connection you make. I mean, I found another act I'd like to mention who's not from Philadelphia. Her name is Adia Victoria. She's from down in Nashville, and but she's not probably. I mean, have you guys heard of her?
No.
I don't.
Right. So she's played Johnny Brenda's twice here, and she does tour nationally, but she's small. But to me, the intimacy of 150 people at Johnny Brenda's or 200 or whatever it was, that's some of my most memorable shows and favorite shows. And I just really got into her work on an album called Beyond the Bloodhounds from 2016. And I think of it as a more nutritious, soulfully more nutritious connection. So it's the opposite. When we do things big, it's very soulless. When we order a package from Amazon, we don't need to see a person to order it. We don't need to see a person even deliver it. We just open the box and there it is. Now, human beings, we know they touched it. But, we did a little video where we were shopping small here in Roxborough, a section of Philadelphia where we're coming from. And I met a little boy. I'm trying to learn Spanish. I was trying to speak Spanish with him, and it opened up a world when I started speaking Spanish. We actually connected. Then we talked to the owners. We know all the names of the people that work there. They know my daughter's name. Everybody knows what's going on. And what happens is your psychology changes. All I was going for was a cup of coffee, which, by the way, at that place, Cafe Roma in Roxborough, is only $1.75 for a large.
Wow.
For coffee, right? At really good Italian coffee. Their small is 75 cents for coffee. But you also have that psychological connectivity to other human beings that you know by name, and they know your family. And that's some nutrition I think we're all lacking right now. So it's not just like some nice gesture to shop small or some like moral, kind of like, what do they call it? Virtue signal or something. Yeah. It's not that. It's actually showing that you've thought beyond your compulsions to just do the convenient thing. Absolutely. And you are consciously directing your power, which Citizen Body wants people to realize how much power they really have. Yeah. If we had 100 people listen to a podcast and they all go check out Brian Walker or Hop Along or Kalani Baylor or any of these people we mentioned, and then they do a show and 20 of those people come out to the show that wouldn't have come out before, that's how it could really start to grow, because people are thinking differently. They're not mad. They're not like against anything. They're just thinking differently about how to use their power, how to invest their time, their money, their attention, their admiration. And I think that not only shifts things economically, but it also shifts things intellectually, spiritually, and actually is the unifying force that we're ultimately after.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree right there. And like the fact that like these artists, like you say, going to Johnny Brenda's, going to a small room and seeing either an act from your area or someone coming through. Very often they're on the same bill. You've got some people from where you are, and then you've got someone coming through, and they're supporting each other. You can, for a lot of those shows, like then you go out to the merch table, and there's the person